Okay, this is going to be the last example of completing the square. Here we have 3x squared minus 12x minus 7 equals 0. And like I mentioned in the last video, this a term needs to be equal to 1 in order for us to complete the square. So here we have a 3, so we actually have one more step to do before we complete the square, and that's turn this a term, this number in front of the x squared. We need to make this a 1. So how we're going to do that is we're going to take our equation here, so I'm going to rewrite it. 3x squared minus 12x minus 7 equals 0, and we're going to multiply it by a number that makes this a term equal to 1. So we're going to multiply this entire equation by 1/3. So the reason why I took 1/3 is that 1/3 times 3 equals 1. So we're going to be left with a 1 here, and then the 1/3 is also going to multiply to every other term in this equation. So a good way to think about it is the 1/3 is just going to distribute to all of these terms. 1/3 times 3 gives us 1, so we're going to just have a x squared. 1/3 times negative 12 is going to give us negative 12 over 3x. 1/3 times negative 7 is going to give us negative 7 over 3, and 1/3 times 0 is going to give us 0. So this is the equation that we're going to complete the square with. Now that our a term is 1, we can do it. So now the steps are going to be pretty normal for completing the square. We're going to want to move this 7/3 over to the other side. So we're going to add 7/3 to both sides. So we'll have x squared minus 12 over 3 is 4, so I'm just going to say minus 4x, and that's going to be equal to a positive 7/3. Now we need to add in our blanks, so x squared minus 4x plus some number equals 7/3 plus some number. And we know that the number that goes in either of these blanks is going to be b over 2 squared. So our b in this case, always make sure to use the b from this simplified version of the equation. So always use the b when your a is equal to 1. So our b in this case is going to be 12 over 3, or 4. So we take 4 over 2 squared, and let's see, 4 over 2 is 2, and 2 squared is 4. So that's going to be what goes in either of these blanks here, just a 4. So we'll write that in. And now we need to simplify over here and then factor this. So really the only thing that's more difficult about the problems when there's a number in front is that the simplification becomes a little more messy. So hopefully you have a calculator or something on your exam and you can simplify this no problem, but it's doable by hand also. So x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals, so I'm just going to say that this is 7 over 3 plus 12 over 3. So we have a common denominator, and x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals, adding these two together, we're going to have our common denominator of 3, and then 7 plus 12 gives us 19. So all of this is equal to 19 thirds. So now that we have this side simplified, we will factor this down, and we could use our rule and know that this is going to be x plus or minus b over 2 quantity squared. So the number that goes in here is going to be b over 2, and in this particular case b over 2 is it's a negative 2, so we're going to get x minus 2 quantity squared, and that's going to be equal to 19 over 3. And just remember that if you FOIL this out, you should get right back up to this quadratic here. So maybe do that on your own. Multiply x minus 2 with x minus 2, and make sure and verify that this is what you get out. So the last thing that we want to do is take the square root of both sides. So we're going to do that, and we're left with x minus 2 equals the square root of 19 over 3, and we'll move our 2 over to the other side of the equation. So we have x equals, we have to add 2 to both sides, so x equals positive 2 plus or minus the square root of 19 over 3. And that is going to be our solution. So when you have a 3 or any number out in front, it's not too much more complicated. The simplification and stuff is just a little bit more messy. I should mention really quick that I'll just grab a new piece of paper. So over here our answer was the square root of 19 over 3. So square root of 19 over 3. This is technically not correct. It's not a good idea to have a square root over an entire fraction, and some people are picky about this, and you might get marked off. So I'm going to show you rationalizing the denominator really quick. And you've probably heard of this before, but I just want to make a little reminder that often when you're solving completing square problems, you're going to have to end up rationalizing a denominator at the end. So 19 over 3 with the square root over it can also be rewritten as just the square root of 19 over the square root of 3. And in order to get rid of the square root in our denominator, we're just going to multiply it by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. So this term here is just a 1, but it's 1 written as root 3 over root 3. And what we're left with is root 3 times root 3 will give us just 3, and then root 19 times root 3. You can just leave it like this, root 19 times root 3, and that will probably be a acceptable answer there. If you want to, I'm not sure if your teacher's going to make you combine these, but this numerator can also be combined like this, square root of 19 times 3. So this is another way to write that, or that's 57. So just a little bit of housekeeping on how you report your answer. Just know that when you solve completing the square, you often have to rationalize your denominator. Really the main takeaway from this video should just be this process here, how to start with a quadratic equation and then go through the completing the square process.